A lesson from the Song of Songs, the first chapter beginning at the 5th verse. I am black but beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not think to consider me, for I am swarthy because the sun has discolored me. My mother's children have fought against me and made me keeper of the vineyards. My own vineyard I have not kept. Show me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you lie down at midday, lest I begin to wander after the flocks of your companions. Here endeth the lesson. A lesson from a treatise by the Venerable Saint Bede. After Holy Church has been led into Christ's chambers through the knowledge and hope of celestial blessings, after she has learned to love him with a righteous heart and to rejoice and exult in his grace alone, it remains to be shown what struggles she endures for the sake of that same love of him, and what afflictions she bears for the sake of acquiring the blessings which she has tasted. There follows, I am black but beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem. She is undoubtedly black with respect to the misfortune of her afflictions, but beautiful in the comeliness of her virtues, or rather, in the sight of the judge, who sees within she is all the more beautiful the more often she is harassed and, as it were, disfigured by the afflictions of fools. Now, she calls the souls to whom she is speaking daughters of Jerusalem because they have been initiated into the heavenly mysteries and are longing for their dwelling place in the heavenly homeland. For in order to console them in their tribulations, the Holy Mother says, I am black but beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, as if she were saying openly, I do indeed appear exceedingly vile in the eyes of my persecutors. But before God I am shining brightly with a glorious confession of the truth, for which reason you ought to be less sorrowful amid the labors of this exile, in which you remember that you are citizens of a heavenly homeland, and in which you hasten through the adversities of a collapsing world toward the vision of eternal peace. Here endeth the lesson. We have gotten to the 5th verse of the first chapter. This is our 7th time of meeting to reflect upon the Venerable Saint Bede's commentary. So I have not yet done the math, but 6 weeks to go through 4 verses. We're going to be at this a little while. We're in it for the long haul here. We hear the Venerable Bede offering his commentary on what actually is one of the verses of the Song of Songs that shows up in popular culture sometimes. Perhaps not so much these days, but I remember growing up and watching, I don't know, it was movies or television shows. I feel like LeVar Burton was part of this for some reason. But anyway, little African-American children saying, I'm black, but I'm beautiful, as part of the civil rights movement. It's understandable why verses get taken and used for different purposes than they're intended. And clearly, this for St. Bede, this verse has nothing to do whatsoever with racial matters. The bride speaks about herself, and the bride says, "I am black but beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem." Bede tells us that it's the recognition on the part of the bride that Jesus sees the church as beautiful, that Jesus sees the church and the virtues of the church as beautiful. That's the beautiful part. So, for example, Bede says, "In the sight of the judge," that's the bridegroom, Jesus, "who sees within, she is all the more beautiful, the more often she is harassed and disfigured by the afflictions of fools." And that's the black side. The black is how the world views the church. So black with respect to the misfortune of her afflictions. The world sees black. Jesus Christ sees the church as beautiful. The world sees surfaces. Jesus Christ sees the soul. I think here of Job, for example. Job, after he seemingly had lost everything, his family, his land, his animals, even his wife betrayed him, he sat in ashes for 8 days before the people came and talked to him. And so he's ashen, he's black. The world sees, and that's what the friends came, I say friends, the interlocutors, the men who came to talk to him, they didn't show themselves very friendly after a while. But they came to accuse him. "You must have done something wrong to deserve this. You must have sinned. You don't really love God." Are the kinds of things that the men who came and spoke with Job as he was naked and ashen, those are the kinds of things they said to him. And yet throughout the book of Job, Job's faith in God remains strong. And by the end of it, when God enters into the scene and speaks to Job and to the others who were talking to him, Job's humility shows forth. He is even, in the sense, thankful for his suffering, which was it's the big lesson of the book of Job. It's the demonstration of being thankful amidst suffering. And Job is thankful. He's made all the more humble by God's presence. And everything is returned to Job by God. In fact, even more so. His family is returned to him, his land, his cattle, his wife. I mean, I could go on a bender here on what the book of Job is all about. I mean, it's a bizarre story, but I'll leave that for another day. "I am black but beautiful." Remember that God called Job sinless, and that God saw Job's faith as strong, that he was blameless. So God saw into Job's soul and saw him as beautiful. Satan, who didn't believe that Job would withstand suffering and instead would curse God. Satan was wrong. And the other people who came to talk to Job, they saw him as more black. Another way to think about this would be to bring to mind martyrs of the church. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Growth in the church comes from being persecuted, being weak, it seems, like Christ was weak on the cross, it seems. My strength is known in weakness. Christ's strength, and the strength that Christ gives us, is truly known when we are weak according to the world. Weak in terms of health, weak in terms of wealth and power and control upon the fallen world. When we are weak, we are actually powerful. Well, the world looks upon the church, and particularly upon those whom the world chooses to martyr, as ugly. The world looks upon Christians who they want to martyr and sees filth, and sees a blot upon humanity. These Christians. We must rid ourselves of these Christians, or this Christian person. There are many martyrs I could bring up right now. Think even in Acts of the Apostles of St. Stephen, the first martyr and one of the 7 deacons, the first deacons, and St. Paul before his conversion, and the other of the council looking upon Stephen, particularly after he called them out, after he spoke truth to power, after he showed them that the very story, the very narrative, the very scriptures that they say they think are holy, in fact, point entirely towards Jesus. And they were angry. They grit their teeth and they stoned him, not because they saw him as God saw him, but they saw him as filth, as rubbish, as black. But Stephen reported seeing Jesus, and he saw Jesus in his glory at the right hand of the Father. Icons of this always depict Stephen on his knees looking up and seeing Christ. Often Christ is reaching down his loving hand towards Stephen. God saw Stephen not as black and afflicted and ugly and rubbish and blasphemer, but rather saw him as beautiful. Beautiful because of his faith. Beautiful because of the endurance of his faith amid persecution, amid trial, amid slander, amid accusation. And so this is a helpful and a kind of spicy verse, because it's the first verse that tells us about how the bride thinks of herself and regards herself. Up until now, it's been the bride talking to us about how much she's yearning for the kiss of Jesus. Yearning for his presence, yearning for his unmediated presence. Previously, she had known Christ only through how he was described and proclaimed by the prophets and by holy people, the patriarchs, confessors, before Christ's nativity. The bride, more than anything else here, signifies, as Bede has already described, the bride signifies the church prior to the nativity of Jesus, whose faithful and wanting to see what the prophets and who the prophets are talking about. And so now we shift into the bride describing herself as black but beautiful, afflicted by the world, but beautiful in the eyes of God for her faith and for her love and desire for God. And so, as Bede paraphrases, I do indeed appear exceedingly vile in the eyes of my persecutors. But before God I am shining brightly with a glorious confession of the truth. For which reason, again she's speaking here to other Christians, for which reason you ought to be less sorrowful amid the labors of this exile, in which you remember that you are citizens of the heavenly homeland, and in which you hasten through the adversities of a collapsing world toward the vision of eternal peace. Because the bride, by God's grace, which she recognizes, and it's always God's grace for the bride, because his grace has given her the strength for a faith that endures through, despite the difficulties and challenges and persecutions, like Job, because she has come out of that or through that by the grace of God, knowing that God's strength conquers all and recognizing his glory because of that. She's saying to the daughters of Jerusalem, which we can see as us, no matter how hard things get in the world, no matter how much of a challenge life throws at us, whether it's from our own poor choices, or whether it's from the unpredictability of a chaotic fallen world that we're participating in and we get caught up in something. Either way, remember the bride who's saying, I'm black, but I'm beautiful. Remember that Jesus, no matter what the world thinks of you, no matter how much the world knocks you down into the mud, that God sees your faith, that God sees your yearning for Christ, that God knows your heart and our hearts. So stick with it. Keep the faith. Call even more upon Christ when we're suffering. And that God, no matter how much we are knocked down by the world, has for us prepared mansions in which, as we dwell, we will see Jesus face to face. We will see and experience the vision of God, which is what it means to enter into heaven. Heaven in which, because of our baptism, we already inhabit imperfectly in this world. The heaven which we glimpse now through the liturgy, through Scripture, through the sacraments. The foretaste of heaven which we have each and every Mass will become the totality of our existence, will become the totality of our way of living. Perhaps it means that the eternal peace is an eternal kiss with Christ. Amen.